Hi everybody, it's Kes. I'm a little bit sick today, so don't mind my voice, but I'm going to interview Mario Schulzke, who is my integrated online marketing professor. He's one of the most sought after professors, marketers, and individuals in general, and he's brought so much insight to my peers and I this year about marketing and life and being unique and true to yourself, and I really look forward to sharing with you today what he has to say. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. So my first question for you is why marketing?
It's a good question. My old boss was this guy named Tracy Wong, who was this like super famous creative director and one of the most brilliant, most humble, most interesting people I've ever worked with. And he always said that advertising was the intersection of art and commerce. And I know we're not talking like exactly about advertising here, but personally, the thing that I love about marketing is that I get to like solve business problems. I'm kind of a business nerd. I like numbers, I like metrics, I like KPIs, I like all those things. But I get to do so in a creative way, right? When you do marketing, I don't want to say you're expected to be creative, but you have a license to be creative. If you want to be creative, you can be. And I don't think that's necessarily true for, accounting and or finance. I think so often when we see, people getting creative in finance and accounting, it tends to be like borderline fraudulent. So in marketing, I get to be creative. I get to solve business problems. I get to nerd out about business problems. I get to, move real metrics. But maybe more importantly than any of it is, I think marketing is sort of the business of people. Right? You need to understand people. You need to learn how to communicate with people. You need to be able to listen to people. And I like people. I didn't become a scientist or something like that where I worked in a lab, or I worked with bugs, or I worked with monkeys, or whatever it might be. I work with people, which I love, and as I do that, I get to both practice sort of the left side of my brain and the right side of my brain, that sort of creative, yet like very businessy manifestation of everything that I love. So yeah, for me, marketing is kind of a home run. Um, that being said, I didn't know that when I was 21 years old or 22 years old. I mean, the reason I was a marketing major, I went to the University of Montana, and truth be told, I took some great classes at the University of Montana, but only like one or two or maybe three of them were in the business school. And one of them was a marketing class with Jackie Moore. And that was one of my like three favorite classes that I've ever taken in my entire life. And it got me to say, you know what, this is what I want to do. Because like I said, the other two classes, and one of them might have been like Middle Eastern history class, and the other one might have been maybe economics. Maybe I could have become an economist, but really, I think I got really lucky that I chose marketing, because in the end, it's been a wonderful career for me.
So you'd say that from what it sounds like from your answer, that the multifaceted aspect of marketing appeals to you, that it's not so cut and dry and straightforward.
Yeah, it's like you get to, you want to nerd out about numbers, you can nerd out about numbers. But you also get to be really creative, right? You don't have to form. One thing that I think makes marketing hard is that there are no exact formulas that you can just like follow and you do a good job.
Totally.
Um, I think the best marketers are creative problem solvers, and I just love applying creativity to what I do from a business perspective. And I'm not an artist at all. Like I couldn't have I couldn't have been a writer. I couldn't have been an art director. I couldn't have been a musician. I couldn't have done theater. Those weren't like um, my jam in many different ways. But I love creativity, and I think marketing is sort of a really nice path for people who want to work in business, who enjoy business, want to make an impact, a positive impact in business, but still like want to be creative and not just look at a spreadsheet all day.
Totally. I like that. And I feel the same way about marketing so far. But my second question is, you grew up in Germany and moved to the United States as a kid. What was your biggest challenge moving to a different country?
Yeah, so I mean, I came to America when I was 16, but I didn't come to America with my family. So I came to America as an exchange student by myself. And then fortunately and or like unfortunately, I would say fortunately, I stayed. I was able to stay. But I mean, the reality is like the hardest thing, the biggest challenge most certainly was being away from my family. Specifically my mom. Uh, my parents got divorced when I was really young. I grew up with my mom. My mom always was, my best friend, my biggest champion. And 16, you're kind of an adult, but not quite yet. So that it was hard to be away from my mom, and it was also, it's still hard in many ways. Now I have a little kid, and I would love for my daughter to see her grandmother more often. So I would say that is the biggest challenge, and it was amplified back then because I came here in 97, aging myself a little bit with that. And in 97, there was no such thing as like broadband internet yet in rural Montana. So my parents didn't even have an email address nor an internet connection back in Germany. So that really meant I would talk to my parents once a month. And I would talk to my parents for 30 minutes once a month, because that's all I could afford to pay in phone costs, which at the time was like dollar 50 a minute or something ridiculous like that. That is a lot easier now, but I would say back then that was the biggest challenge. I gotta say, I've always loved America. I've loved Montana. I love being here. Sort of assimilating to this culture in many ways was not hard. That was fun. That was, just like exploring, you're learning new things, but being away from my parents was hard.
Definitely, that's a big one. I can't imagine. My mom moved here from the Philippines when she was really young, and she always said similar things like that. And I'm lucky enough to have not experienced that, but I'm glad that good things came out of it for you.
Yeah.
So moving on to the next question, taking a turn a little bit, your teaching style is different than most professors, and students seem to adhere to it more than other teaching styles. Can you describe your teaching style and why you choose to teach that way?
Yeah. I mean, I venture to say that my teaching style um, is like borderline chaotic. And like what I mean by that is like I don't provide a whole lot of structure. And I provide broad goals and objectives and projects and things that we want to accomplish together, but I don't give you sort of an exact playbook on that, prescribes like what you do this week and that next week and the week after. And then we're going to have a quiz to see whether or not you did it. And then we're going to do a test. And then we're going to do a midterm paper or whatever. And two things. One, I would not teach if I had to like administer quizzes and tests and all that stuff, because I would just get bored by it. Like intellectually that would not be very interesting to me if I just followed some prescribed structure that has me standing in front of the class every Tuesday and Thursday, pointing my finger at a PowerPoint. Like, no, thank you. But I would say more importantly, what it is that I think with education is very prescribed. And I think for a long period of time, that is very good. So as you go through school, there are, and starting in kindergarten or elementary school or middle school, like there's sort of a very prescribed structure. You do this, and if you accomplish that, then you get to do this. And if once you pass this class, or once you get your high school diploma, then you can go to college. And then when you get into college, like, here's the prerequisites, and if you want to be this major, you got to take these classes first, and you need this cheap. I mean, there's like there are rules, and by and large, if you just like follow the rules and you put an effort in, like, you're gonna do pretty great. I'm not saying you're gonna become a doctor, but like, it's not rocket science.
Yeah.
But once you graduate college, like, that changes. Like, once you graduate college, there's no more playbook. There's no more template. It's kind of like the Wild West, right? You get out and then you're scrambling to figure out what to do next. And there's so much uncertainty and discomfort because of that uncertainty, right? Because there's no more playbook. It's like, okay, I got a good GPA. Where's my job? Where's my career? It doesn't work like that. So I think a big, like, why I teach the way I teach, and I think it's relevant and important for my students, is I think it's really good practice to not have a playbook, to not have an exact template to follow, to not just like follow the rules and do well. Because once you get out, there's a ton of uncertainty. There's a lot of discomfort. There's a lot of unease. And I think that by not providing all the structure in my class, I give my students a pretty good exposure of what it's going to be like when they graduate.
Definitely. And, I think the structure throughout elementary, middle, high school for me is what led to a lot of my success following up or leading up to college. Like, I attribute a lot of that to the reason why I got a scholarship and got most of my college paid for. But on the other hand, I do think that this class and your teaching method, this is my Jackie Moore class, because this is the first time that I understood marketing the first time. Like, I think the structured classes that I've had for the past 3.5 years were good, but they were confusing. And I think the lack of structure in this class is what helped me build my own sense of what marketing actually is. And I think a lot of the students in class feel the same, because I've had a lot of these kids in my classes leading up, and I've never seen participation or enthusiasm out of them until this class. So I think a good balance of both, but having a class like this without the structure really, like, helps you evolve as a person. So
Yeah, well, A, first of all, thank you for saying that. But B, I think part of what makes the class so special has much less to do like with me, and it's about like trying to unlock, what's and this might sound kind of cheesy, but like what already sits inside of all of my students, right? Like, everybody's interesting. Everybody in some way, shape is like already remarkable. But I think by sort of having these rules and these guidelines and these templates, I think there are many ways for that uniqueness, that remarkability to like really manifest itself. I think that's what we're seeing happen in this class. It's like people just get to be more themselves. And that, I know that is uncomfortable too, right? And that and that's what I push on. Like when I see discomfort, I want that, because I believe it's an opportunity to help make someone stronger and more resilient. Now, I don't want to break people. That's not the right. But the goal just is to encourage people and to challenge people to like be more of who they already are, just allowing that to manifest a little bit. And, we're all, one of my marketing mentors is this author named Seth Godin. And, Seth, I think he once wrote a book that it's called something like We're All Weird. And we are all weird. And I think that's okay. I think that's actually what makes life interesting. And it's fun to see that manifest a bit in our class.
I think so too. And I think from my perspective, having known a couple of these students, not personally, but throughout classes, and seeing that little spark or interest that they're actually excited to talk about themselves or present whatever they feel they have to bring to the table is exciting. And
Yeah.
it's awkward on the outside, but I think everybody on the inside is happy to share. So
Well, and then we can move on. But the interesting thing about it is, like, you as a student, you see that, right? You see other people being uncomfortable and then breaking through that.
yeah,
And I think that's addicting in a way, right? That's encouraging, and I think as a class, one the class only works when we all work as a team. It's not about having me standing up there and making all the rules and talking all the time. I think the class only works when we work together. Like we're just better together. And again, at first, there are very few people who are comfortable with that. I'd venture to say that, like, the first 3 weeks in class, there may be 3 or 4 students who are really comfortable speaking up. And, now that we're almost done, I mean, we got a couple weeks left. I'd venture to say that there's maybe 2 or 3 students who are not comfortable speaking up. And I think everybody else is sharing, everybody else is working together. And I mean, for me, that is just incredibly gratifying to see, just to see growth.
I agree, definitely. And so for my next question, I'm going to move back to your personal life a little bit. In class, you told us about your personal bell curve of money and happiness early in your career. I believe you said around your 30s, and how this altered your life. How did that personal breakthrough change the way you operate as a business person and then as a human being?
Yeah. I mean, I think what you're speaking about is that, when I was in my 20s, when I graduated college, and I'm an immigrant. It's not like my parents are immigrants or my grandparents are immigrants. Like, I am the immigrant, which means that at any point, if I failed, the story would end, right? Like, if I didn't succeed in my career, the story of my family in America would have come to an end. So I always had to work. I had a work permit. I had a green card. I got to stay in America because ultimately companies were willing to sponsor me. They're willing to, like, try to make the point that, I was able to bring something to the table that, like, the American workforce didn't at the time. I don't necessarily think that was true, but, like, the bar for me was a little bit higher because failure wasn't much of an option, or wasn't an option, or if the option would have just been, like, for me to go back home to Germany, which wouldn't have been all bad either. But so in my 20s, I just optimized my career. I prioritized my career in every which way. I took, like, a take no prisoners approach when it came to my work. And I was incredibly driven, and always with the goal to deliver more value, to win more, to get bigger titles, to make more money. because like that, those were sort of the KPIs, the key performance indicators that to me allowed me to stay in this country. Now, at some point, I did become a permanent resident, right? At some point, I sort of got the license to stay here for the rest of my life if I wanted to. And like right around that time was also when I burned out. Like that was when I hit a bit of a wall. I think it was probably like a 10-year sprint out of college of just, living on airplanes and pitching business and winning business and in just like pushing real hard. And I don't, I can't badmouth that time because without it, I wouldn't get to be where I'm at now. Like I wouldn't get to even be in America. I wouldn't have met my wife. I wouldn't have gotten to have my daughter here. I wouldn't have gotten to have the life that I have in Montana. I wouldn't have gotten to, ever teach students like you, be at the university. So I can't say that time was a mistake. But what I would say is, like, when I had all this energy, when I had a ton of energy, I applied it towards making progress in my career, towards making more money, having bigger jobs, bigger titles, bigger problems. And then once I achieved that, or I at least achieved like being able to stay in this country permanently, I hit a wall. And I think, ever since then, I've been able to place much, much more emphasis and focus on optimizing for time. So if before I was optimizing for money and success, I think once I hit that wall, I begin to optimize for time and happiness a lot more. And that wasn't like I didn't wake up one morning and that was easy. Like that took a lot of work, because a big part of who I was as a person was like an advertising executive, right? I was someone who did this and that and this and that, and all of a sudden, like I wasn't anymore. And so if you think about like self-worth, and if you think about liking who you are, it took me a few years to really grow into those new shoes. And those new shoes were much more focused on being where I wanted to live, having more time, spending that time with people who are important to me. And the funny thing that kind of happened is like, it's not like the success just stopped. It just changed and evolved. And for me, everything was a little expedited. And I think partially because of my sort of challenge as an immigrant in this country. But I think that journey that I went through is not uncommon. I think a lot of people, probably, push, 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 push. And then they recognize that, time is kind of limited. That there are things more important than work and success. And then you switch a little bit and you evolve and you go up. And not only do I think I'm a much happier person now, I'm also a much better person. Like, and by better, I just mean less selfish, more balance, calmer. Like slightly more patient. I'm never going to be the most patient person in the world, but there's a lot of growth that happened there for me. So if you read like classic literature or philosophy, there's always like the idea of the hero's journey. This idea that at some point you encounter great challenges, and then you overcome those challenges, and then you're the hero, and then you'll overcome, and then another challenge will present itself. And I think in many ways that's just like the human experience. For us to have problems, be in hard situations, and then overcome them. And I think every time we overcome them, we grow as people, and we have an opportunity to become better. And by better, I don't mean more successful, I mean happier.
Is that something that you would go back and change at 30, or would you leave it?
No, I mean, I wish I learned my lessons quicker, right? Like I wish when I hit the wall, because when I hit the wall, when I really struggled, like that meant like a couple of years of like pretty severe depression. Which meant that there's some relationships that got broken in the process, that there were feelings that were hurt in the process. There's like that journey, that struggle wasn't always pretty. And it was necessary. I wish it could have happened quicker. I wish I'd just known, like, okay, now I'm supposed to do this. But when you're in the middle of a storm, like you don't really see that. So I wouldn't take anything back. I mean, the one thing, like I said, that as I've gotten older, that I think I've just learned more and more is that like struggling is just part of the human experience. And I don't think it necessarily has to be a bad thing. I think it's always an opportunity. Like whenever we encounter a hard situation, it's an opportunity to grow as people. And I've certainly done that.
Definitely. And I think, just because I think it flows a little bit better, I'm going to jump to one of my questions. As a new parent, have your views on business and marketing changed at all? And what new perspectives have you gained in general?
Well, I mean, the thing I would say is that like many of the best business people I know, by business people, I mean, entrepreneurs and leaders, they have a strong bias towards action, which means that like you see a problem, you solve it. Like you see a situation that could be improved, you try to improve it. You have an idea that uh that that you're excited about, you make it happen, or you try to make it happen. And when I say a bias to action or bias for action, in a way I'm also saying like you're not very patient, right? You just like you see something that's broken, you try to fix it. Well, being a parent is, I'm not saying that a bias for action is a bad thing as a parent, but the biggest lesson I've had to learn, or I'm learning, is just to become more patient. And especially, my daughter's 20 months old. Like she doesn't fully understand me yet. Like we don't fully understand her yet, right? And so you just have to be patient. And I've had to learn, like having a kid is the single best tool to become more patient. Because you're forced to, otherwise, otherwise you drive yourself crazy. So I think that's been an interesting juxtaposition, where it's like everything so far in my life has been around like taking action and moving fast. And I think now everything is kind of slowing down a little bit. And I'm also at the right time for that. I'm not 25 anymore. I'm 41. So for me now, it's I think my body wants to slow down a little bit compared to like my body when I was 25. I don't have the energy anymore. I don't have the drive anymore that I used to have. So it's fun to have a family now, to have a kid now, because I think it lines up with sort of my own internal pace. But yeah, being patient, that's been the biggest juxtaposition to like how I acted in business before. My thoughts on business and marketing haven't changed at all. That's been a process that's been over the last decade or so, I have really become much more conscious and aware about the role that like business and marketing like plays in our society. And I've always, or since then, really believed that we need to try to be a force of good. We need to try and deliver value. We can't just like be selfish and just sell to whether people need it or not. And I, having a daughter, I've believed that, I've grown that belief has only grown um because now it's not just about like my life and my lifetime anymore. I hope that my daughter will be, alive 80 years from now. And I won't be, and I want to make sure that, we leave this world in a place where like 80 years from now, her life can be as good or better than mine was and has been. And I think that's a high bar. But when you become a parent, like that's ultimately your goal. Like you want your kid or your family to have more opportunities and a better life than you've had. And I've had an insane amount of opportunities and great life so far. That's a high bar, but I'm sure motivated to make sure that my daughter isn't going to be any worse off than I was. And I'm not talking about money here. I'm just talking about humanity and the environment and just like how we treat each other as people.
Definitely. I obviously don't know what that's like yet, but it's good to hear. And I think those are all valid points. And just on that note of delivering personal value, I am really excited to hear what you have to say about this question because I know you touched on it in class, and I think it flows well from your answer of what you were just talking about. You consistently preach authenticity and uniqueness as two of the biggest factors of success in marketing. What advice would you give to someone who doesn't feel unique, feels imposter syndrome, or hasn't discovered their niche yet and the value that they can bring to the marketing world?
Yeah, that's a great question. And here's a little bit how I think of that. No, there's sort of there's two paths. And like one path is the right path, the other path is the wrong path. Neither one of which is an easy path. I think the wrong path is the path of like trying to be someone you're not. And by that I mean like trying to be someone else. Having bad role models, like thinking you need to behave a certain way, you need to dress a certain way, you need to drive a certain car, you need to act in a certain way, right? Like that to me is like it's not easy because you're not being yourself. So I think there's a lot of like pain that comes with that. And B, I just think it's the wrong path because you'll get to the end of the road and you'll look in the mirror and it's not who you are, like deep down. And I think the other path is the path, and it's a path. It's a journey. It's not like a current state of like becoming who you're supposed to be, becoming who you want to be. And the reason I say it's a journey, it's a path. It's like, of course, you're not there yet. And I don't know if we ever like fully get there. I know I'm a lot closer now than when I was 22, right? And that's been an incredible journey. It's been a really hard journey at times. It's certainly been a journey where I've failed and I've fallen flat on my face and I've gotten back up and I've learned from those situations, and like hopefully I've gotten better because of it, and I've gotten like happier because of it, and I've gotten stronger because of it, and I've gotten closer to the person who I want to be. But what's funny is like I think with both of those paths, the path of like trying to be someone else and the path of like being yourself, I think self-doubt and, you know, imposter syndrome is part of that journey. I just think when you're on a path of becoming who you want to be and who you're supposed to be, eventually you'll overcome imposter syndrome because you're not an imposter, right? You're who you're supposed to be. And I think on the other hand, that path, there's no end to it, right? If you're always trying to be someone else, if you're always trying to be, you know, who others expect you to be, I don't think there's happiness on that journey. I think it's a lot of self-doubt, maybe covered up by superficialities. But I think the path of becoming who you're supposed to be and who you want to be, not an easy path, but that's the right path. And you know, the reason I talk about it in my class is because I think life is so much more interesting when we're all who we are supposed to be. Because we're all different, we're all unique, we're all weird, we're all goofy, we're all, you know, smart in certain ways and dumb in others. And I think when you act like that, it's just like it's a lot more like authentic. You know, if you have, I'm sure you have friendships where you know, you enter a room and you can just be Kiss and you can just be yourself, and you know, maybe it's family, right? Like, you know, the people around you like love you for who you are and accept you like to be that person. And I think step one of that journey is that we all like act a little bit more like the person we want to be and who we want to become, even if it is weird, even if it is somewhat unconventional. Because I think in the long run, like, we're gonna be happier, and 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 so will everybody around us, right? Because it's gonna encourage people, it's gonna empower people, it's gonna inspire people. And like, you know, I'll give you an example. You know, I didn't have my daughter until I was 40 years old. So I could have a lot of imposter syndrome about like being a dad, right? I could have been like, oh my gosh, like there's all these people that learn how to be a dad at 25. You know, they're 15 years ahead of me. Like, what do I know? But I didn't want to, I wanted to become the dad who I wanted to be to my daughter, right? And and you know, that might be, you know, a mix of like how, you know, my fathers were to me, and or it might just be like very unique and interesting and maybe unconventional. And it's not like I don't have any self-doubt about like being a dad, because there's a ton of stuff like I don't know, right? There's people who've had 5 kids. They've had a lot more experience being a dad than I've had it. But I don't know. Like, I'm on the path of trying to become the dad who I want to be, who I'm meant to be. So while I'm happy to, you know, learn from others and observe others, like, I'm never willing to just like do what others do because that's what I'm supposed to do.
So you would say that that path, whichever one you're on, can always be changed, though, for the better or worse. Like, you're not stuck on one or the other, because I think that's how a lot of people feel when they feel those things.
Yeah. No, I think you can always change. I'm not saying that's always easy, right? And that's partially, I think, maybe my class can help be a bit of a Kickstarter for that. Um, uh, no, I don't think it's easy. But I think it's always possible, and I think it's always like worth it. Because sometimes that means, you know, sometimes that means like you eliminate people out of your life who only saw you to be a certain kind of person and only accepted you as a certain kind of person, but that is not who you are. And so that can be a very painful journey. I think the earlier you like start making like steps toward like the authentic path, right? The authentic self path, the easier it is. Because there's a I don't know if it's called a first principle or whatnot, but it's this idea of path dependency. Um, and the longer we are on a certain path and do things a certain way, the more dependent we are on that path, and the harder it is to break. And in business, actually, like that's something that you always try to like counter. You always try to overcome because you you want to make decisions because they're the right decisions. You don't want to make decisions because you're like on a path that you're dependent on. And I think the same is true in life. So I think the earlier you try to break it, the better. That can mean you do it when you're 25, or it can mean you do it when you're 85. I think it's better to do it earlier, just so you sort of have more life left of, being yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's kind of what I was touching on earlier when I was talking about seeing other students evolve, even just in this first semester. I think it's really great that we're starting so early on. And, it's a project, but it's really like a pivotal point for everybody to just put themselves out there and see what they can change or hone in about themselves. And I think I totally just, I'm sure as all my other peers have felt for a lot of my life that I was being fake or trying to fit into a certain box, or, you know, if people make one assumption about you, you feel like you need to continue that assumption out, or I don't know. But I think this project and this class is huge for everybody to start as so young. And I think one thing that this project has helped me with personally is becoming a better listener. I mean, and not that I was a bad listener, but I think really having to force myself to take advice and hear it out and think about it, and then have to go back and edit this and like rehear everything that people are saying again and again. And now I feel like I can share these things with people, even in just in conversations with my friends. And I think I am a better person because of this project. Even though this specific interview project isn't like my funny side or my most, the high points of my characteristics, I think it really has helped me grow. So totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's what it's about: growth, right? Progress, forward momentum, traction, like taking a step forward. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And it's great. I mean, you don't just get better by taking tests. I think you get better by doing things that make you uncomfortable. Um, it's just like when you work out, you can go in and do the same light weights every day, or you can try and like use some harder weights. And I think whenever you use harder weights, like you're gonna have a better shot at becoming stronger and better. And I think the same is true for this class, this project, life. It's like pushing yourself. And I think it's easier to push yourself when it's on a path that is yours, and not just like somebody telling you to do something or be a certain way or act in a certain manner. I don't know. It's boring.
Yeah. And I think this presenting my project in this class, having it be so individualistic, was more nerve-wracking and more stressful than any test I've ever taken to get into college, past high school, past my hardest classes. I mean, it's awkward, but
Yeah.
I think that's like
Yeah.
one of the best. This is like more awkward than my public speaking class freshman year. I mean, it's difficult, but I think breaking out of that shell is like really essential, especially for people my age. So, on that
Well, it
note,
gets easier.
what's that?
It gets easier.
Yeah, I hope so. I know it will. But on that note, What do you feel is your best quality as an individual? And then what is something that you would like to work on, since we're talking about self-growth and reflection?
I mean, I think my best quality is I have a I have a very high degree of confidence. Like I'm very self-confident, which I think for big parts of my life, like that just manifested, uh, that just sort of manifested itself in like how I lived my life and what I accomplished, and then as I started teaching about a decade ago, and as I like that was as I was changing as a person, or as I was evolving, I actually learned that I have that same degree of like high confidence in others as well. So I would say my best quality is probably that I can inspire confidence in others. That I can make like others believe in themselves. And I'm not talking about that as like some sort of like miracle cure, right? Sometimes it's somebody is 3% or 5% more confident in themselves, right? It's not like, okay, like 100%, or maybe sometimes it is, but yeah, it's like I think my biggest quality is um that that I can inspire confidence in others, to in themselves, and that's been by far the most gratifying like part of my career now, right? Looking back at the people who interned for me 18 years ago, who I taught 10 years ago, and seeing their career, seeing their path, like seeing their successes. And every once in a while, getting a little nudge, just that I had like a very small like role in that, or a little reminder. That's incredibly that's like the most rewarding thing. And I love it. Like I love like I don't need to become any more confident. I don't need to be, any more successful. I don't need to make, a ton more money. Like I sort of love that it switched towards like, now let's see like what kind of like positive impact I can have like on others when it comes to unlocking their own confidence and self-esteem. So I think that's my superpower. I think that's a quality that I that I have, and that I'm most excited to like develop and live over the coming decades. And then I think like a quality that I can improve upon, um, I mean, I think I can get pretty distracted sometimes. Like I get excited about a lot of different things. So I've never like been someone who can just do like one thing at a time for very long. And I don't know if that's like a negative quality or if that's like a positive quality, but it is sort of tied to I have a pretty low attention span. I am not the greatest listener. Like and that's not to say that I can't listen, but it doesn't come natural to me. So like I really like have to make a conscious effort to do that. And 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 sometimes I do that, and that can be wonderful, and I love it, but like it doesn't just it doesn't just happen. So there are certainly situations where somebody will be saying something to me, and it goes in one ear and comes out the other. And then I often catch myself and I'm like, oh, I need to listen. And then I listen, and it's always wonderful when I do, because I learn something new, or I learn something about someone else, but that does not come like naturally to me. And I think I mostly learned that by being married. Is when you get married and you're always around, someone, I think it's even easier to just kind of like block them out a little bit. And that's not what you want to do in a relationship. So as like a husband, my wife has helped like teach me that, to just like listen more and like pay attention. And by listen more, I don't mean like I always listen, but like consciously listen. Um, and that's certainly a quality that not only do I know I can improve up on it, but I'm excited about that. Like I'm working on that. And I think part of the key there is to not have my brain be so full all the time with all these different ideas and all these different things that I'm thinking about, but to actually like find a little bit more stillness in life. And when you have a little bit of stillness, I think there's a little bit more space up there. And when you have a little bit more space, when things come in, like they don't just get like, mumbled and jumbled with all the other stuff that I've got going on. So like learning how to focus, learning how to consciously listen a little bit better. Those are things I can improve up on.
And I think now that you have a first daughter, let me tell you, you're in for a lifetime of learning how to listen.
Yes, I'm sure.
My dad, I have a sister, so just only daughters and a wife, and I can tell he gets so overwhelmed sometimes, but I think he's really grown into a much better listener now that we're all grown and everything. So you have that on your hands to look forward to.
That's my path.
Yeah. So this last question is going to be especially interesting for me. I'm turning 22 in a couple weeks. So if you could tell something to your 22-year-old self with all the knowledge that you have now, what would that be?
Play the long game. And like what I mean by that is like kind of know where you want to go, like have those big dreams, have those big goals, and like work towards those. But recognize that like not every day is going to be a win. Like not every day you're going to make progress. Like not every year, every month, every week, every season is going to be fun or is going to even feel like you're on the right path. But I think when you play the long game and you don't like give up on your goals and your dreams of like who you like want to become and who you want to be and what kind of life you want to live and what kind of person you you want to become, like I think then ultimately you'll get there, and like eventually you'll get there. And I mean the funny thing is I came to America and I landed in Montana and I loved Montana. um and then I moved to big cities, right? Seattle, Los Angeles, Portland, Los Angeles. And but really all I ever wanted was to like live in Montana and to like fish a lot and to fly fish a lot. To fly fish a lot and to ride a lot of bikes and to run a lot of trails and to cross country ski and to like just be here and like still have a career. And truth be told, when I was 25 or 27 or 22, I didn't know that that was gonna be in the cards someday. And I kind of given up on that a little bit. And I don't want to say that like I gave up on it and I stopped trying to accomplish that, but I did lose hope a little bit. And I think when you are depressed, and I wasn't depressed when I was 22, but I was sadder like in my late 20s. I think partially it's because I'd given up on the idea of like, being able to have the kind of life again that like I used to have when I went to college here in Montana. And like here, this was the happiest I'd ever been. And then I moved away to prioritize my career. And I think there were many times in my 20s where like deep down I thought that living in Montana again and having the kind of life that you can have here just wasn't in the cards for me anymore. So, I would have just like reminded myself to play the long game and to like not give up on that dream and to keep pursuing it, because the way you ultimately accomplish any dream or any objective, it's just a bunch of small steps. Some go forward and some go backwards. And when you're in the middle of it, like you don't see the end of the mountain, right? When you're climbing up a mountain, you don't see what's on the other side. And I would just tell myself to like keep playing the long game, and that eventually you'll be on top of that mountain and you can see what's on the other side. But
That's actually very interesting to me because I grew up in the San Diego, like in between San Diego and LA, and moving here to Montana is also the happiest I've ever been, and the most true to myself I've ever felt. And I think I'm feeling a bit of anxiety lately because I'm trying to get all these certifications in like coding and Google this and whatever. And you know, my goal is also to move back to Montana one day and have a spot. And but right now I am looking at Portland, Seattle, back in San Diego, um, for career opportunities and to be able to take off. And it does make me nervous because I've had the same thought, like, who knows if I'll be able to even, afford it back here, or if there will still be the type of real estate that I want, or if I can afford a second place or have this be home. So I'm glad to hear somebody who's done it already say that type of thing, because that's exactly the position I'm in right now.
yeah, and in a way you have to do what you're about to do, right? Like that's your that's the Cass hero journey. And just have faith that like have a goal or a vision of like where you like that. That's wonderful that you have that, though, because a lot of people don't, right? Like a lot of people haven't gotten to experience like maybe the way you feel right now living in Montana, and the kind of person that you've gotten to be, and the kind of lifestyle that you get to have, right? So consider yourself very fortunate that you at least know like what it is that you maybe want to go back to someday. Because I also know a lot of people who they've never gotten to experience something like Montana, or who might be from Montana and who should be living in San Diego and who've never gotten to experience that, right? It's not just about, everybody should move to Montana. It's not. But I think just the fact that you already have a bit of that perspective is like very fortunate.
I think so too. It's a very two polar opposite areas. I don't know if you've been down to like Encinitas or North County area, but you've been in LA, so you know how different it is.
Yeah.
But I do feel very valuable, and I feel a lot of value from this class and this interview. And um, yeah, I'm excited. It makes me less nervous, I think, especially putting all these interviews out there for other people to see too, and for our classmates to see. And yeah, I have a positive outlook, even though I am still a little bit nervous. So
Well, a little bit nervous is good, right? And yeah, I mean, continue this project. I think it's wonderful. I mean,
I plan on it.
it's one of those things where it's like someday I always say that, and Steve Jobs said it, like you can only connect the dots looking backwards. You can't connect them looking forward, right? But when you do the right things and you do what you're supposed to do, at some point the dots do connect looking backwards, right? And I don't know. I think this can be like part of your journey, and at some point, like you'll look back and you'll be like, wow, I'm so glad I did that. I had no idea it was going to have this impact, right? Or with my teaching, I didn't know I was going to be a good teacher. Now I kind of know, and I look back and it's incredibly gratifying, but I didn't know that when I started and I looked at it, looking forward.
Definitely. Well, I'm excited to work on this interview and put this one up. And again, I really do appreciate you taking the time. I know you are the person putting this project on, so it's extra to have to ask you to be in my project, but I really do appreciate it. And I hope you got something out of it too.
I did. Thank you for asking me, and let me know when it's live. I'll help you promote it.
Sweet. Thank you so much. Have a good
All right,
rest of
Cass,
your
have a great
day.
rest of your day and a happy Thanksgiving.
You too. See you next week.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.